If Sophie had known what awaited her in her new apartment, she would never have moved in. But some things only become clear when it's already too late. Sophie sighed with relief as she placed the last moving box down. Her new apartment in the old multi-family house felt cozy, even though the building itself had seen better days. The property manager, Mr. Brenner, had welcomed her kindly, but his parting words made her pause. Most people here kept to themselves, he had said. If someone stood out to her, she should simply ignore them. Sophie wanted to ask what he meant, but before she could, he had already left. A strange comment, she thought, as she poured herself a glass of water. On her first night in the apartment, Sophie had the unsettling feeling of being watched. She blamed it on adjusting to the new surroundings, but when she went into the bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror, her blood ran cold. Through the crack of the door, she saw a figure standing in the dark hallway, a thin man with a pale face. He didn't move, just stared at her. Her heart pounded. A quiet, uneasy shiver ran through her. Who was this man? Why was he standing there? She wanted to say something, but her throat tightened. Slowly, almost mechanically, the man turned and disappeared into the shadows of the hallway. Sophie ran to the door and locked it hastily. Her pulse calmed only after several minutes. Who was this man, and what was he doing here? The next day, she tried to brush off the experience. Maybe it was just a neighbor who got lost. But later, as she looked out of her window, she noticed someone watching her from the apartment across the way. The man from the hallway. His stare was blank, his eyes empty. As soon as she moved, he vanished, as if he knew she had noticed him. A cold chill ran down her spine. Something was very wrong here. On the third night, a faint scratching noise at her door woke her up. She sat up in bed with a jolt, her heart pounding. Slowly, she crept to the door and peeked through the peephole. The man stood right outside, just inches away. His face was pale, his eyes dark like deep voids. Suddenly, he slammed his hand against the door. Sophie gasped and, with trembling fingers, grabbed her phone. She dialed the emergency number, barely able to state her address. The police assured her they would arrive in minutes. But when they arrived, the man was gone. No sign of him, no footprints in the hallway. They searched the building but found nothing. Skeptical glances were exchanged before the officers advised her to call again if anything suspicious happened. She felt increasingly unsafe. She decided to confront Mr. Brenner. The next morning, when she asked him about the eerie man, the property manager turned pale. "Again," he repeated hesitantly. "No, that can't be." "Yes. He lives in the apartment across from mine. He watches me all the time." Mr. Brenner glanced around nervously as if making sure no one else was listening. Then he lowered his voice. "Miss Meyer, that apartment has been empty for 10 years. Lars was the last tenant, but he disappeared back then. Never found." Sophie's throat went dry. Her eyes darted to the window. Her breath caught. But this time, the apartment was empty. No figure, no dead eyes. Sophie was about to sigh in relief when her phone vibrated. An unknown number. Hesitantly, she answered. A whisper came through the speaker. "Let me in!" A cold shiver ran down her spine. Slowly, she turned around. The door to her apartment was open. "What do you think? Would you stay in an apartment where something like this happened? Share your thoughts in the comments or tell your own spooky experiences. Some neighbors you greet once and forget. Others you wish you had never met. Julian never expected his new neighbor to change everything. Julian had always enjoyed the quiet of his small apartment complex. The neighbors kept to themselves, and the atmosphere was peaceful until she moved in. It was a late evening when he first saw her. He was carrying groceries up the stairs when the door across from his, which had been vacant for months, creaked open. A woman stood there, wrapped in a long dark coat. Her black hair hung in damp strands over her pale face, and her eyes, empty and unblinking, locked onto his. Julian felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. Hi, he muttered, shifting the grocery bag in his arms. The woman tilted her head slightly but said nothing. Then, without a word, she stepped back into her apartment and closed the door. Over the next few days, Julian couldn't shake the uneasy feeling about his new neighbor. At night, he heard soft footsteps pacing in her apartment, sometimes lasting for hours. Occasionally, he thought he heard whispering, though he could never make out any words. One evening, while taking out the trash, he saw her standing by the mailboxes, staring at the empty slot where her name should have been. She didn't move, didn't even blink. Julian hesitated before clearing his throat. "Need any help?" She slowly turned her head toward him, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something. But after a moment of silence, she simply walked away, disappearing up the stairs without a sound. That night, Julian woke to the sound of knocking. At first, he thought it was a dream, but the rhythmic tapping continued. Groggy, he checked his phone. 3:12 a.m. The knocking grew louder. Cautiously, he walked to his door and peered through the peephole. His neighbor stood outside, her face unnervingly close to the peephole. Her dark eyes bore into his. Julian's breath hitched. She didn't move, didn't knock again, just stood there. He backed away, unsure of what to do. Then his phone vibrated in his hand. A text from an unknown number. "Let me in." His stomach dropped. He hadn't given his number to anyone in the building. Heart pounding, he forced himself to look through the peephole again. She was gone. The next day, Julian decided to ask the building manager about her. He found Mr. Wagner in his office and hesitantly brought up his concerns. "That apartment?" Mr. Wagner frowned. "There's no one renting it right now. Hasn't been occupied for over a year." Julian felt his blood turn to ice. "No, someone moved in a few days ago. A woman, dark hair, pale skin." Mr. Wagner's expression darkened. "That sounds like the last tenant. Lived there alone, kept to herself. Then one day she just vanished, left everything behind." Julian swallowed hard. What happened to her? They never found her. That night, Julian locked every door and window. He tried to convince himself it was all a mistake, a misunderstanding. But as he climbed into bed, his phone vibrated again. "I'm still here." With trembling hands, he turned his phone off and buried himself under the covers. Sleep was impossible. Every creak in the apartment made his heart race. Then, just as his eyes began to close, a soft, deliberate knock came from the closet door. Julian froze. Would you stay in an apartment after something like this? Share your thoughts in the comments or tell your own eerie experiences. Sometimes we move to a new place hoping for a fresh start, only to find that some places refuse to let go of their past. Paul was happy. He had finally found the perfect house for his wife and young daughter. A charming suburban home with a large garden, ideal for family time outdoors. The neighborhood was friendly, filled with the laughter of children and the scent of blooming flowers, except for the old man next door. He never spoke a word, yet his eyes followed Paul's every move with eerie suspicion. One late evening, Paul sat alone on the terrace, enjoying the crisp night air, when a movement by the fence caught his attention. A dark figure darted along the property line. Startled, he jumped up and ran towards it. But when he arrived, there was nothing. No sound, no footprints, nothing. A few days later, he noticed something even stranger. Small, deep holes had appeared all over his garden, as if someone had buried something or dug something up. Unease crept over him. Who was doing this, and why? Then came the night when everything changed. Just past midnight, Paul woke to a scratching sound at his window. His heart pounded as he sat up and looked outside. In the pale moonlight, he saw it, a figure, stretched and distorted, with a face that was not entirely human. Hollow eyes locked onto his, watching him from behind the glass. Paul's breath caught in his throat. Then, in a blink, it was gone. The next morning, he called the police. They searched the property, but nothing was out of place. No footprints, no signs of an intruder. Paul saw the fear in his wife's eyes as he recounted what he had seen. Determined to get answers, he spoke to the elderly neighbors, and what he learned made his blood run cold. His home, his beautiful house with the large garden, had been built on an old cemetery. Decades ago, the graves had been relocated, but some things refused to stay buried. Several families had lived in the house before him, yet every single one had left in a hurry. Now Paul understood why the old man had watched him with such wary eyes. What would you do if your home wasn't just haunted by the past, but by something that never left? Share your thoughts in the comments.